My name is Evelyn Brooks. I am 72 years old, a retired school teacher, and for the past year I have lived under the same roof with my son Mark and his wife Sierra. I thought sharing a home would mean warmth, maybe even protection in my later years. Instead, tonight, I find myself cornered in my own kitchen, staring at the two people who should have been my safe harbor. Mark leans against the doorway, one hand pressed to the frame as if he is guarding the exit. Sierra rests her hip against the counter, a small paring knife twirling slowly between her fingers. The light above the sink casts her shadow long across the floor, cutting between us like a line I am forbidden to cross. "You know," Sierra says with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "Old lottery winners have accidents all the time." Her voice is sugar on the outside, steel underneath. The words land in my chest like a stone. I can hear the faint ticking of the wall clock above the refrigerator, each second louder than the last, hammering into my back as if time itself has joined their little siege. I glance at my son. His face is pale, lips pressed tight, but he doesn't move. He doesn't defend me. He doesn't even flinch. I remember when he was a boy who clung to my hand crossing busy streets. Now he blocks my way as though I am the danger, not the one in danger. My palms feel damp against the smooth ceramic of the sugar jar beside me. Inside that jar is more than sugar. It hides a tiny lens, no bigger than a button, that has been recording every whispered threat and every greedy plan for weeks. They don't know yet, but the kitchen is not theirs tonight. It is mine. The silence stretches. Sierra taps the knife against the counter, an impatient little rhythm. Mark clears his throat but says nothing. And me? I stand straighter, the blood rushing hot behind my eyes, anger and disbelief tangling together. I never thought I would have to protect myself from my own family, but as I look at them blocking my way out, I understand that this moment, this exact night, will decide whether I'm just another old woman pushed aside, or whether I fight back and finally show them who I still am. 6 weeks before that night in the kitchen, my life changed with a slip of paper. I was standing in line at the corner grocery store, clutching a carton of milk and a loaf of rye bread, when the clerk told me the numbers were out. I handed him the ticket I had nearly forgotten at the bottom of my purse. His eyes went wide, and he asked me to step aside. I remember the ringing in my ears, the strange blur of his words. "Ma'am, you're the winner." It wasn't until I was sitting in my car, milk sweating on the passenger seat, that the reality hit me. I had just become a multi-millionaire at 72 years old, but instead of joy, what settled in me was caution. I didn't tell Mark. I didn't tell Sierra. I didn't even call my sister. I drove straight to the small credit union in town, sat across from a young advisor, and asked in the calmest voice I could manage, "What's the safest way for a woman like me to protect herself?" He blinked, then leaned in, lowering his voice. Within an hour, he had explained accounts that could not be touched without my consent, credit freezes, and the importance of a will and medical directives. I signed papers with a trembling hand but kept my face steady, walking out. I realized my secret wasn't a blessing. It was a test. At dinner that evening, Sierra made her usual comment about how tight money was and how Mark's commissions were barely covering the bills. I stirred the pot roast and listened, my heart thrumming with the weight of what I was hiding. I wanted to tell them, to see their faces light up, but something in me whispered, "Wait." Over the following days, I began to notice how often money circled our conversations. Sierra talked about private schools Mason deserved, vacations they had earned, cars they needed. Mark stayed quieter, but he never stopped her. Each word added another stone to the pile of doubt pressing on my chest. So I kept silent, I smiled when they hinted at me pitching in more, nodded when Sierra suggested I might enjoy simpler living arrangements someday, and tucked my lottery papers deeper into my desk drawer. In the quiet of my bedroom, I touched the envelope and felt both power and fear humming inside it. I knew then, the true test wasn't whether fortune had finally found me. The test was whether my own family could withstand the temptation of it, or if it would crack us wide open. It was a Sunday afternoon when the shift became impossible to ignore. Mark ordered pizza, something he rarely did anymore. Money had been tight, he said. But that day, he acted as though things were fine, tossing bills at the delivery boy with a smile that felt too wide. Sierra set the table, sliding paper plates across the dining room with the precision of someone arranging a stage. I carried napkins from the kitchen, watching them both. My son, once easygoing, looked tense beneath his cheer. Sierra, all bright chatter, had a sparkle in her eyes that made me wary. I set the napkins down, and almost immediately, Sierra leaned toward me. "Evelyn," she began, using my first name instead of Mom, which she had never done before. "We've been talking. It's really important that we all stay organized, especially with money. You're living here, and that's wonderful. But there should be some structure." She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside was a printed document with neat columns, rules, and signature lines. Mark cleared his throat. "It's just a family agreement. Mom, nothing formal. You'd contribute $1,800 each month toward the house. It's fair, considering expenses." His voice carried the tone of someone who had rehearsed every word. I stared at the paper. $1,800. More than half my pension. And then I saw the second page. Every expense over $500 would require their approval. A joint account, as Sierra had written at the top in bold letters. My hands shook slightly as I set the paper back down. I searched my son's face for a flicker of hesitation, for the boy who used to pick dandelions for me on the walk home from school. Instead, I saw determination wrapped in unease, like he was following Sierra's lead but too afraid to step back. "I don't understand," I said softly. "I thought family meant trust." Sierra smiled, her nails tapping on the table. "Of course it does, but this will keep things simple. No confusion. We're protecting you as much as us." Her words slithered through the air, smooth and practiced. Protecting me. I looked at the pen she had laid carefully beside the folder, its shiny barrel catching the light. My chest tightened, anger pricking hot under my ribs, but I swallowed it down. I folded the papers, slid them back toward her, and forced a smile. "Thank you for thinking of me," I said. "I'll look them over." The truth was, I already knew my answer, but I also knew better than to give it in that moment. As I cleared the plates and carried them back to the kitchen, I felt the ground tilt beneath me. This wasn't about pizza or paperwork anymore. It was the opening move in a game I hadn't agreed to play. The walls in our house were thin. Late at night, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of pipes, even the muffled television in the living room. But on that particular night, what carried through the drywall was not background noise. It was betrayal, dressed up as planning. I had just settled into bed with a book when I caught the sound of Sierra's voice drifting down the hallway. At first it was hushed, as though she didn't want to wake me, but soon her tone sharpened, and I could make out every word. "She's slipping," she said. "I've seen her forget things. Her keys, her glasses. If we document it, we can petition for temporary guardianship. It'll be airtight." My chest tightened. Guardianship. The word alone felt like a lock snapping shut around my life. I set the book aside, heart thudding, and leaned toward the wall. Mark's voice followed, low and uncertain. "She's not incompetent. Sierra, she still drives. She reads every night. She's fine." "Fine?" Sierra hissed. "She could wander off. She could mismanage bills. We're protecting her and Mason. Do you want her decisions to ruin everything? A private room at Silver Pines would be comfortable for her. She'd be taken care of. And we'd finally have control of the finances. It's better for everyone." I pressed my hand over my mouth, fighting the urge to gasp. Silver Pines, a nursing facility half an hour away. They had already looked into it. Mark said nothing for a long moment. Then his chair scraped against the floor. "We'll think about it," he muttered, though it sounded less like a refusal and more like a stall. I lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazily above me. My son was slipping into silence, letting Sierra's words carry him further down a path that ended with me behind locked doors. Sleep was impossible. At dawn, I made coffee with trembling hands and sat at the kitchen table until the sun spilled across the linoleum. I thought about the years I'd spent teaching children to speak the truth, about the nights I'd worked extra shifts so Mark could go to college, about the promises parents make to themselves when their children are born. None of it mattered in that hallway conversation. That morning, I opened my laptop and ordered 3 small cameras online, hidden in everyday objects, one in a lamp, one in a sugar jar, one in a picture frame. When the package arrived 2 days later, I tucked the devices carefully around the house. If they were going to whisper through walls, then I would make sure the walls whispered back. The first push was small enough to seem harmless. Sierra offered to hold onto my insurance card to make things easier when we went shopping. She slipped it into her wallet with a smile that told me I shouldn't argue. The second push came a week later, when Mark installed the bank's mobile app on my phone. Tapping through the screens before I could protest, he told me it would help us all stay transparent. I nodded, though what he really wanted was visibility, not transparency. I decided to give him something to look at. I opened a new account at the credit union, moved the lottery money there, and left only a modest balance in the account he could see. To Mark, it must have looked like my pension and nothing more. But the pushes kept coming. One evening, I picked up a stainless steel kettle at the store, a simple replacement for the one I'd used for 20 years. Sierra's eyes narrowed when she saw the receipt. "That was over $500. Evelyn," she said, her voice low and clipped, "we talked about the spending rules." I laughed softly, trying to mask the sting. "It's just a kettle. Sierra." Her smile was tight. "Rules are rules. We all agreed." I hadn't agreed to anything. Still, I tucked the kettle onto the stove and let the conversation drop, though the heat rising in my chest burned hotter than the burner beneath it. At night, I sat in my room and watched the footage from the cameras. Their whispers had grown bolder, discussions about selling my car, about closing my library card to keep me from confusing bills. I knew what they were building, a case, brick by brick, that would paint me as incapable. That was when I remembered the flyer tucked inside my purse, the one I had taken from the elder law clinic weeks earlier. On the back was a phone number for a local journalist, someone who had worked with the clinic to expose financial abuse cases. His name was Darren Cole. I stared at the number for a long time before dialing. When his voice came through the line, calm, steady, curious, I felt something loosen inside me. I told him my story, carefully, piece by piece. He listened without interruption, then asked if I would be willing to meet. We sat in a public library 2 days later, surrounded by rows of books that smelled of dust and ink. Darren handed me a small button-shaped microphone and showed me how to press it once to record. "You'll know when the time is right," he said. "Just keep it on you, And remember, you're not alone. I walked out of that library with the mic hidden in my coat pocket, the weight of it both terrifying and reassuring. The pushes had been invisible until now. From here on out, every shove would leave a mark, one I could prove. The kitchen smelled faintly of onions from dinner, though the air itself was sharp with something else: fear. Mark leaned against the doorway, blocking the exit as though he were a stranger guarding a cell. Sierra lounged by the counter, the paring knife still in her hand, her reflection glinting off the chrome of the refrigerator. "You've been forgetful, Evelyn," Sierra said, drawing out each syllable like a diagnosis. "We're filing the guardianship petition tomorrow. It's better if you don't fight it. Safer for everyone." I forced a steady breath. "Guardianship? You want to take my life and sign it away with your pens?" Sierra tilted her head, amused. "You make it sound so cruel. We're protecting you. You'll have a private room at Silver Pines. You'll be comfortable. And of course, we'll handle the finances. That's what family is for." Mark's jaw tightened. "Mom, please, don't make this harder." His eyes darted to the floor, ashamed, but his body didn't move from the doorway. Then came the sentence that had haunted me since the first time she whispered it. Sierra's smile curved wider. "Old lottery winners have accidents all the time. Everyone would believe it, too. A fall in the shower, a wrong turn behind the wheel. Tragic, but believable." The word struck like a slap. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My own son stood silent beside the woman who had just suggested my death, but fear gave way to something hotter, something steadier. My hand moved, slowly, deliberately, resting on the sugar jar at the corner of the counter. The tiny lens inside had been recording everything, and now it was time. With a soft click, I pressed the hidden switch. A faint beep echoed in the silence. Sierra frowned. "What was that?" I straightened, my voice stronger than I felt. "That," I said, "was the sound of truth." Before either of them could react, I stepped past Sierra, opened the living room door, and let in the man who had been waiting just outside. Darren Cole walked in, his camera crew trailing behind him, the red light already glowing. Mark stumbled back, color draining from his face. Sierra's knife clattered against the counter. "You've been recorded for weeks," I told them, my voice low but clear. "Every whisper, every plan, every threat. You thought I was powerless, but you were wrong." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. Mark's shoulders sagged. Sierra tried to laugh, but it came out brittle, cracking at the edges. I looked at them both, no longer trapped, no longer afraid. For the first time in months, I felt the ground steady beneath me. The kitchen, once a cage, had become my witness stand. The living room had never felt so bright. Darren's crew set up their equipment with quiet efficiency, cameras clicking into place, cables coiling across the carpet. The glow of the studio lights washed the color out of the furniture, leaving the room exposed, every shadow erased. I sat in my armchair, the same chair where I had once read bedtime stories to Mark, and now I watched him pace like a trapped animal. Sierra perched on the edge of the sofa, her arms crossed, her smile thin and strained. She still tried to control the narrative, speaking sweetly to Darren as though charm could unspool the web she and Mark had spun. "We were only trying to help Evelyn," she said, tossing her hair back. "She's been overwhelmed. Families make tough choices, that's all." Darren didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to me. "Evelyn, are you comfortable sharing what you've recorded?" I nodded. My throat was dry, but my voice came out steady. "Yes. People need to hear it." The cameraman gave a small signal, and suddenly, my own living room was live on KLC7, I imagine the audience on the other side of the screen, neighbors, church friends, maybe even my former students, leaning closer as the first clip began to play. The audio was sharp, unmistakable. Sierra's voice filled the room, smooth and cold. Old lottery winners have accidents all the time. The words echoed not only in my ears, but through the speakers, across town, across the state. Sierra's face froze. Her smile cracked into something rigid and hollow. Mark closed his eyes, shaking his head. "I told you not to say that," he muttered, but the microphone caught it. The betrayal between them spilled into the open. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of that single sentence hung in the air like a guillotine. Then Darren leaned forward, his tone measured but piercing. "Sierra, Mark, how do you respond to this? This isn't protection. This is intimidation." Sierra opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her hands trembled where they gripped her arms. Mark's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. I sat still, my palms folded in my lap, the camera lights reflecting off my glasses. I had nothing more to prove. The evidence was speaking for me, louder than any protest could. When the segment ended, the crew packed up, leaving the room dimmer, quieter, but forever changed. The house that had once held secrets had spilled them into the world. I knew the legal system would take time, that hearings and court dates lay ahead, but as I watched my son avoid my gaze and Sierra sit hollow-eyed on the couch, I realized the truth had already done its work. The world had seen them for who they were, and for the first time in months, I felt the crushing weight of silence lift from my chest. The weeks that followed felt strangely still, like the hush after a storm tears through town. Reporters called, neighbors whispered, and the courthouse became a place I never imagined I would walk into at my age. Yet there I was, sitting on a wooden bench, waiting to hear the fate of my own family. The district attorney's office had moved quickly. With the recordings and the live stream already public, there was no denying what Sierra had said or how Mark had stood by. Their lawyers tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, as if the words had been jokes taken out of context. But jokes don't come with bank forms, or whispered plans about guardianship, or signed deposits at nursing facilities. In the end, Sierra accepted a plea bargain. She stood before the judge, her shoulders stiff, and admitted to making threats and attempting to exploit an elderly relative. She was sentenced to community service, mandatory counseling, and 2 years of probation. Mark's charges were lesser, complicity, negligence, but enough to leave a mark on his record. He was ordered into counseling as well. I didn't clap. I didn't cheer. Justice isn't loud. It's a quiet thing, measured in the space you reclaim for yourself when the fear finally lets go. Back at home. I walked into the kitchen one morning and let the sunlight spill across the counter. The sugar jar was still there, the tiny camera long removed. I touched it gently, remembering the night I had pressed the button. For the first time in months, the jar was just a jar again. I thought often about what had been lost: trust, peace, the illusion that family always means safety. But I also thought about what had been gained. I was no longer silent. I had a voice, and it had been heard. With a small portion of the lottery money, I started the Silver Shield Fund at the local church. It wasn't much, just enough to pay for consultations with elder law attorneys for people like me, people who felt cornered in their own kitchens. Each time the phone rang in that office, I felt a spark of purpose ignite. One evening, Mason knocked softly on my door. He stood there awkwardly, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Grandma," he said, "are you mad at me too?" I knelt to meet his eyes. "No, sweetheart, never at you. The truth is, family can wound you deeper than anyone else. but it can also heal in unexpected ways. As I closed the door that night, I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, I am not a cost. I am not a burden. I am a life still worth defending. And in that quiet, I finally felt whole again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.